when perhaps you use negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement, or punishment with either clients or employees or agents, and the extent to which it worked or did not work. Because all of us in this room have done all three, right? Right. All of us have done all three. Very, very important to get. And you can use them all. You just have to, as Superman's father said, only use your powers for good. They're all useful. All kinds of feedback are useful. All kinds of reinforcement are useful. Punishment is the least useful, the most often one I see companies use, though. Right? I've got a client in San Diego, not in the real estate business. They write people up faster than anybody I've ever seen, and their turnover's huge, and they're not getting the results they want. So what do? Write people up more and more. What is writing a person up? What is that? What form of reinforcement or feedback is that?
Punishment.
Punishment is exactly right. And so what we're seeing is the punishment isn't working. And I told them the other day, stop writing people up. Well, how will we get things done? I don't know, but you'll have more people to get it done if you stop just writing everybody up. All right, we're going to look at the 8 rules of communication. Then I'm going to go over your homework. Then we're going to be out. We'll be out a little ahead on the first session. There are 8 rules of communication. You're going to practice these with your accountability partner this week. Number 1, make the message clear in your own mind first. So I want you to write down 2 words. I want you to write down the word frank, F-R-A-N-K. And next to the word frank, I want you to write the word clear. And then I want you to write the word diplomatic under that, and then write the word tactful. So you have frank or clear, and then you have diplomatic or tactful. Okay? Now, what a lot of people do, I want you to imagine that the box I'm in, so over here is one axis, down here is the other. And I want you to imagine frank is on this axis, and diplomatic and tactful is on this axis. Okay? So it's not like this. It's not like diplomatic's down here and frank's down here. It's like this. So this is frank and clear. This is diplomatic and tactful. The goal is for you as a coach to be both, not one or the other. The goal is to say, think of this, frank and frank and clear. 0 is down here at my elbow. 10 is at the tip of my fingers. 0 is at the tip of my fingers on the horizontal axis. 10 is down here. Everybody got that? So 0 to 10, how frank am I? How clear am I in my communication? 0 to 10, how diplomatic am I, or how tactful am I? All right? So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like you to think of yourself right now. And we're going to start on the frank axis, frank or clear. 0, remember, at my elbow, 10 at the tip of my finger. And I want you to ask yourself, what score would you give yourself on clarity and frankness? So when you think about communicating, when you think about doing what you do every day, if you were to score yourself on how clear and how frank you are, what score would you give yourself on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 being you're crystal clear and crystal frank, 0 being not at all. The only answer you cannot give is a 5. Then on the bottom axis, diplomatic or tactful, what score would you give yourself?
Is this at home or at work?
That's a great question. I guess we could do work if you want. But in general, I would give yourself a score. All right. So some of you tell me where you are on the frank and clear scale. Where are some of you? You're a 6, Amy. Who else?
7, 8.
7, 8. 8, 6. 7. Tracy, good. How much, Jamie? 8.
Hey, Mike, you said you couldn't give yourself a 5. I'm curious to know why. It's just
because it's in the middle. I want you to pick a side one way or the other. Yep. You'll know. I'll share with you more why in just a minute. And then let's do tact and diplomacy on a scale of 0 to 10. Where are you guys on tact? You're at 8 on tact and diplomacy. Amy at 8. Tracy 8, 7, 7. A lot of 8s. A lot of 10. Bill, well done. Liz a 4. Yeah. Liz, what was your frank and clear score?
7. From the book.
Yeah. It's a rule, right? They don't let you live in New York if you're not that way. Yeah, they kick you out. So let me give you some ways to see this so that will help you be clear in your own mind first. If you have a high score in frank and clear and a score below 5, so above a 5 in frank and clear and below a 5 in tact and diplomacy, you are probably perceived as somewhat blunt or somewhat direct, right? So that's that. If you have a very low score on frank and direct, frank or clear, you have a low score, so under a 5, and a very high score on diplomacy, above a 5, you are probably perceived often as evasive or unclear. In other words, you say things in a way that you think you're being really clear. You ever had that experience where you thought you were really clear and 2 days later somebody came and said, I don't really understand. I thought I was really clear. That's a lot of diplomacy, not enough clarity. If you're in the bottom left, if you have a low score in frank and a low score in diplomacy, you're generally perceived as non-communicative. In other words, not a communicator. That this person does not really communicate with me. Any of you have people that work for you like that? Like, they just don't communicate. If you're upper left, that's what we call balanced efficiency, which means that's the best place to be. I have a lot of clarity and I have a lot of tact, so I can deliver the message in an effective way. So if both are over 6 or 5, that's probably upper right. You're probably about where you need to be. But if you find yourself like a 5, and this is the point that I was making, if you have a 5 or a 4 in diplomacy as an example and a 9 in frank, people are like, whew, take it easy. So I want you to remember when you are coaching that you are going to show up that way in your coaching. And some people can receive it well, and some people can't. So you always want to be looking and listening to your client and trying to understand how they receive messages. And sometimes you got to ask, right? Do you want it with the bark on or do you want it with the bark off? Do you want it? How do you want it? Right? No, give it to me straight. Or, well, I don't want you to devastate me or anything sometimes. And then sometimes you just know. But it's never, listen to this, everybody, it's never okay to be evasive with a client. And here's why. The client is coming to you with expectation that you're going to help them bridge the gap between where they are and where they need to be. And where you don't want to be is a lack of clarity. You don't want them to leave the session with a lack of clarity. Now, they may leave confused or they may leave not knowing what they're going to do, that kind of thing. That's not what I'm talking about. You just want to make sure, and you're going to learn this in the questioning section, how to summarize and be clear about that. And sometimes people will say, I need to know what's going on. Well, you know what? Then that's your opportunity to clarify. All right? All right, let's look at number 2. Be congruent with words and body language. Congruent means equal to, as you will recall. And what, as a coach, you want to do is you want to show up aligned with what you're saying and what you're doing. Let me give you an example. Now, listen very carefully. I did not say be aligned with what your body language is and what you're thinking or feeling. No. Years ago, I was working with somebody, and they had made huge amount of progress. Huge. They were doing great work, and I was really excited. They had really struggled to get there, and they came into the session, and they told me they just laid an egg. I mean, they had messed something up so bad that they had really been working on. And I don't know if I was tired. I don't know if I was hungry, but I leaned forward and I said, "You did what?" And then as soon as I said it, I just saw their shoulders and I was like, oh, crap. I don't know if you ever had a moment like that in your life where it just kind of like spewed out, but it did on this particular day. So, right, know yourself well. Let me give you a couple of clues about this because you're going to learn in session 4 or 5 about congruity with words and body language in terms of how you set up a session. You want to make sure, let me give you an example this morning. The client that had a terrible holiday, and she was tearful, and she had her head in her hand, and she was leaning toward the camera. And so all I did was I leaned forward and got a little closer to the camera, so I was leaning toward her. That's all you need to do. You don't need to mirror it like they taught us in the 70s or 80s. You don't need to do any of that. But you don't want to be sitting back in your chair with your hands behind your head when they're telling you that they just had a horrible experience, right? You also don't want to jump at them, particularly virtually, but also in person. Like if they say something that really surprises you, you don't want to be like, whoop. And I'm a dead giveaway with body language. If somebody's telling me a story and I'm like, oh man. Right? And so I'm not saying don't do it if you have that kind of rapport. I'm just saying make sure you're not saying, I am so happy to talk to you right now. It is so, right? So you want to show up congruent. Very important. Kobe Bryant, God rest his soul, one time Shaq said to Kobe Bryant, there's no I in team. And Kobe Bryant said, yeah, there's no we either. That was pretty funny. And so when I talk about I statements, there are 4 I statements I want you to practice. I think, I feel, I need, and I want. And I'm going to give you the grad school question for coaches. And this is my favorite question. My friend and former coach, Lois Kramer, taught me this question. It's a brilliant question. So I think, I feel, I need, and I want. And then the bonus question is, I wonder. I wonder. Now, the question I use is, I wonder if it would make sense. I wonder if it would make sense to. I wonder if it would make sense to talk about this. I wonder if it would make sense to consider this. So when we talk about I think, I feel, I need, and I want, it's just simply, I think we're onto something. I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm feeling pretty certain, but I want to just go back over that with you. And what that means is that you surrender you statements as best you can, right? And it's not, I think you're an idiot, not that. It's, I think this is what's happening. I'm feeling a little confused about it, and I want to make sure I'm clear so that we can work this out. So I'm wondering if it would make sense for us to talk about this. It's very different than you said this, and you've said this, and you've said this, and you seem to be feeling this, and you seem to be doing that, and you see how that immediately kind of puts people back on their heels. I statements always work better, and the hotter it gets, the more intensity there is, the better it works. You don't use them all at once. So in your homework with your accountability partner, I want you to practice that. So if your accountability partner says, bring me up to speed, give me a 3-minute update on what's been happening since we last spoke, you know what, I'm feeling pretty happy. I think I need to really work on my question asking. And I need to ask you a couple of questions because I want to make sure I'm on track. Right? That's kind of how you have that conversant approach. Now, I want you to skip to number 5, and then I'm going to come back to number 4. The only way I statements work is if you stop using buts. So somebody last week asked me a question about something that they're doing, a proposal they sent me to look at. They're about to buy a car wash, of all things, and they wanted me to ask them what I thought of the proposal. And I said this. I want to have a minute to read it. So we can do it now, or I can call you back because I want to make sure that I'm clear about what it says because I feel a little bit confused about the deal. Everything inside of me wanted to say, but it looks like a good contract. No buts. And I want to make sure that you and I understand what we're trying to accomplish before we do that. So remember that any time a but is present, it tends to erase whatever you just said. I love you, but you drive me crazy. The only thing they hear is you drive me crazy. You did really well in your math class, but your reading grade is terrible. They don't hear you did great in your math class. They just hear your reading grade is terrible. So I want you to get clear that the elimination, the retraction from buts as much as possible is important, particularly if you're dealing with somebody who disagrees with you about something. So if somebody says, I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree with you, I would say, I'm not, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. It's important because I feel like we could get to the place we need to go. And I know we may end up in opposite camps. Get rid of butts as best you can. It's hard to do because there's a lot of big butts out there. Oh, sorry. All right, go to number 4. This is the hardest thing to do. Acknowledge their perception as real to them without using buts. Now, I'm going to give you, as a coach and as humans, some phrases to use because we're laying the foundation for next month when we do diagnosis. There are 2 ways that I acknowledge perceptions. I realize it seems that way, and you might be right. I realize it seems that way, and you might be right. I don't think anybody in this office has gotten a listing in 30 days. I realize it seems that way, and let's talk about how that can be different for you. That's not true. Jane got 3 listings the other day. Because as minute as you come up against somebody's perception is the instant they will argue. Right? Now, there is a lie going around I want all of you to get. Perception is reality. Oh my God. That is so untrue. If that were true, I would stand in front of the mirror every day and say, I look like Matthew McConaughey, I look like Matthew McConaughey, I look like Matthew McConaughey. I might look like Matthew McConaughey's great-grandfather, but I don't look like Matthew McConaughey. Doesn't matter what my perception is. Perception is not reality. Reality is reality. But it's not your job to convince somebody as the coach what reality is. Your job is to acknowledge their perception is real to them. Nobody at school likes me. I realize it seems that way. Tell me what happened today, because I feel like I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. You hear the use of an I statement with an acknowledgement of their perception. I don't think I'm going to get this. I don't think I'm going to get this listing tonight. You might be right. You might not. I hope you do, but you might not. Let's talk about some ways that we can ensure that you won't get it. Not, oh, come on, just think positive. Say some affirmations. Look in the mirror and tell yourself how great you are. No, you might not get it. And that's cool. But let's talk about the best ways we can work out to help you get that listing. Because what tends to happen is we want to rescue people, or we want to help people, or we want to do better by people. And then what we have a tendency to do is kind of come off the rails a little bit. And that's not always good. All right, number 6, don't be a fogger. Anybody know what a fogger is? Anyone want to take a shot at what a fogger is?
Completely unclear.
Close. That's in the right zip code of a fogger.
Blow smoke up the butt.
That's awesome, Francis. That might be a better use of it, actually. No, here's what a fogger is. A fogger is a person who when you ask them what time it is, they tell you how to build a clock. You know people like that? I've got a client in San Diego. She's a regional vice president, a senior vice president for a large mental health company. She's very sharp, PhD. And her boss, the COO, when we were briefing on what she wanted me to work with her team on, said, all I want you to, we'll call her Dr. Smith, all I want you to do with Dr. Smith is teach her not to fog. I just want her to learn how to land the plane. So that was a request for which of the 4 boxes? Skill, program, or what was it? Skill. It was a request to teach her a skill. And so when I got Dr. Smith on the first call, I've been coaching her for a year now, but when I got her on the first call, I said, what's your understanding of why we're working together? She said, my boss tells me I talk too much. I'm like, no. Boss did not tell you talk too much. Your boss tells you that when you talk, you say too much without saying anything. You can talk as much as you want as long as you say something. We literally, at one point, I put a stopwatch. I took my phone and I put it up to the camera with a stopwatch, and I told her, you have 30 seconds to make your point. Unfortunately, she burst into flames, and I never heard from her again. But the fact of the matter is, you all know foggers, right? My brother, God bless him, he's a fogger. Corey, how are the kids like in school? Well, they ride the bus. Have you ever known the history of buses? Do you know why buses are painted yellow? Oh, God. That makes me crazy. Land the plane. Land the plane. That's what don't be a fogger means. Stick to the present and the future, only using the past as a reference. This comes from my therapy days. I will tell you that there's very little use in evaluating the past, y'all. Very little. Most things that are dead need to be buried, and the past is dead. It needs to be buried. Let's focus on now and moving forward. And then finally, dumb is your friend, dumb is your friend, dumb is your friend. You're going to hear me. We're going to do a whole 6 hours on this one rule. Dumb is your friend means ask better questions. Now let's put these rules together. Somebody comes in and says, I don't think I'm going to get this listing tonight. There's a lot of competition. You validate their perception. I realize it seems that way, or you might not get it. And what I'd like us to talk about before you go out on that listing presentation are some things that would help you increase the odds of you doing that. Are you willing to have that conversation? I don't know. It just feels intimidating. I get that it feels intimidating. It often is intimidating, particularly when you're relatively new in the business. Can we spend 5 minutes? Here's the validate and ask. I realize it feels that way. I realize it seems that way. Here's the question. Could we spend 5 minutes? So on and so forth. So that these 8 are really a cake mix. You want to be using these 8 as a cake mix all the time. Any questions about the 8? Because this is a big part of your homework. Everybody got it? All right. Let's look at your homework. Next page. By the way, I've given you another worksheet. If you ever are with a client, you can do this as well. You might, in fact, I would encourage you after this session to do this about our session today. I've used this from time to time. Maybe I don't do it in writing, but when I have a client that's really struggling to get somewhere, I always ask these 3 questions. What have I learned? What are you going to do with it? And what difference will it make? What have I learned? What am I going to do with it? What difference does it make? All right, let's look at your homework. Last page, page 12, before we go for the day. You're going to meet how many times with your accountability partner, everybody? Twice before our next session. You're going to track your own high gain activity. So what I want all of you focused on over the next 4 weeks is I want you really tracking your high gain activity. And here's why. Number 1, I want you to be more productive, obviously. But what I really want you to get is the experience of doing it. Part of your final is going to be helping people think about their high gain activity. So I want you to get the experience of the obstacles you run into, the challenges you ran into, so that your awareness of your high gain activity is more important. I want you to prioritize the types of coaching based on your preference. So we did some of that today. So remember, problem-centric, program-centric, skill-centric, and client-centric. I want you to talk with your partner about, like, if I wasn't going through Staver certification, I would tend to go first to skill, then to problem, then to program, and then maybe client. Even though it's all about the client, we default to that. I want you to study the coaching prerequisites. Remember the prerequisites back on, I don't know what page it was on, but back on some page. Page number 8, I think. Study those and really start to formulate in your mind, where do you need to work, right? Do you need to do a values exercise? Do you need to think more about your philosophy? What are the things that you really need to work on? And then finally, practice the 8 rules all the time. Remember, practice being clear. Practice asking good questions. That's what I want to do. Let me give you a precursor of the next session. On the next session, we are going to spend the entire time talking about how to diagnose clients. The actual diagnostic steps to understanding where a client is at that particular moment. I will give you plenty of notice. It is by far the most, I think it's the most difficult. You think it's the most difficult, Pam, or the most confusing, the diagnosing one, or is it the question one? What do you think?
I think it's right up there with the question 1. I think this is fine.
Yeah. So all I'm going to do is walk you through how to diagnose. It's going to take the full 3 hours, but by the end of that 3 hours, you're going to be really, really ready to practice. You won't have it mastered yet, but you're going to be dialed into, I see what's happening, I know what's happening, and I know how to intervene. And that is, next to questions, is going to be the most important one. And so be prepared for that. Maybe bring a couple of cases if you want to bring somebody you're working with or a case you're working on. You want to bring it for us to diagnose and work with you on. In fact, let's make that part of your homework. Think of somebody that you either are working with or have worked with, and just bring a few sentences to remind you of them. And we'll use those in real time as a case study next time to help you diagnose what's actually going on with them. All right, any questions? You're 20% finished with your certification. God bless you. That's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. So I would go, if I were you, I know it's 3 full hours. It's a long time. You don't have to listen to it all, but you might come back and fast forward to some parts and listen to me teach it again so you're ready. Meet with your accountability partner, and I will look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.